Just a quick note about today's episode of Turning Pages. Ann Nesbitt, whom I speak to about Anahareo Saves the Beaver, will be in town making a presentation at Brightwater Tuxedo on May 2nd. The book is currently available at 210 Gallery, located at 210 Princess Street. Ann will be back in town September 27th as part of Nuit Blanche, giving a presentation at 210 Gallery. Here now, my conversation.
Welcome to Turning Pages, a series of in-depth conversations with authors about their works.
All right, well, one of the authors of Anahareo Saves the Beaver, Ann Nesbitt, joins me on the program to discuss this new children's book. Welcome to the show, Ann.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
Wonderful. So, I mean, this is as I mentioned, you're one of the authors, and I'm always curious about kind of process and about collaboration when it comes to a book that involves more than one voice or more than one, authorial voice. So, I'm very curious about kind of how it came to be that the three of you worked on this book.
And it's actually four because the illustrator is a key player as well. And then we have two Indigenous advisors, so there's five of us. And it's been the most amazing project I've ever been associated with, and I've been on lots of projects that have been really exciting. So I'll take you back. It actually started about 15 years ago, longer than that. I have written a number of plays, a couple about Anahareo, and some about Anahareo and Grey Owl, because I spent my summers in Riding Mountain National Park, and Anahareo helped Grey Owl when he became the naturalist of the first national park. He became the first naturalist in the national park system. And it always intrigued me that she actually initiated the whole thing, and nobody mentions her much. So about 3 years ago, and I worked with George Hartland from Friends of Riding Mountain National Park on these projects, and we got historical grants to research them. And about 3 years ago, I was in the Friends of Riding Mountain National Park bookstore, and I picked up a children's book about Grey Owl, and I looked at George and I said, Anahareo is not mentioned once in this book. And he smiled and he said, well, what are you going to do about it? And I said, we are going to write a children's book. And so that's how it started. And when we've been working on the plays and things, we've been in constant contact with Anahareo's daughter and a niece and a grandniece. But one of the staff at Riding Mountain National Park said we should contact Carol, or Anahareo's niece, Carol Crow, and we'd never heard of her. So I emailed her and she was really excited. And so we had a third author. And we also realized we needed Indigenous advisors because our beloved Eugene Blackbird had passed. And a friend of ours mentioned that we should contact Dennis and Elaine McKay from Rolling River First Nations. And I did, and asked them for coffee, and we thought it was going to be half an hour. And 3 hours later, we were still talking. So then, after we got the book written and organized, we realized we needed an illustrator. And after a year of looking, we just couldn't find anything that really quite suited us. And I was at the Truth and Reconciliation Days here in Nanaimo, and I looked across the field and there was a children's book, and the illustration was absolutely just the kind of illustrator we wanted. So I rushed over and I bought the book and I showed it to Carol and George, and we all decided that she was the one. And then we couldn't find her on the internet. So that posed a bit of a problem. But Carol asked around and she finally got Carla Joseph's email address, and she emailed Carla, and Carla was delighted to be a part of the project as well. So that's how it started. And we had the story, George and I, basically what we did was we took a scene from the play because her life is just too extensive to do a whole book for children on. And the scene that we took is when Anahareo finds two baby beavers whose mother has been trapped and unfortunately killed, and convinces Grey Owl to adopt them with her. And she also convinces him to give up trapping as she does, and help her initiate the conservation movement in Canada and around the world. And when we got Elaine and Dennis on board, they were giving us advice and teaching us some things. And they suggested, well, why don't we translate some of the words into Anishinaabe? And so they did. And so some of the words in the book are translated into Anishinaabe, things like animals and lynx. And when they were talking with me, I said to them, I said, you're telling me wonderful things and they're just almost wasted on me. Why can't we share them with the children? And so we now have Indigenous wisdom pieces in the book. And Carol looked at that and she said, well, we should have environmental insights as well. So there are little sections that have environmental information. For instance, the lynx, it says to the children, did you know that a lynx could see 250 feet? So there's little pieces like that. It's also in meters, but I can't remember the meters. So there we are. So the whole process just grew and grew and grew. And it was just so exciting.
For a process that grows and grows and grows, obviously, then you have to think about like economy when it comes to a children's book, right? That like it's fewer words, it's a shorter book. How to like pare things down? It obviously sounds like you were thinking about that from the start, taking just a scene from a play, right? That like it's like one moment in time and telling that story. But even then, telling that story with like a paucity of words, like what kind of challenge does that present for you, particularly as like, a playwright where you have a bit of time, you can expand?
It wasn't a really big issue, actually. And being a playwright, I'm also a fiber artist and a labyrinth designer. So I see things visually. So from the very beginning, I was working with the text, but I was looking at it visually as well and how it would relate. So it was quite easy to pare down the text. But then I was also spacing the text within what we thought would be the illustrations. And that's one of the really unique things about this book. We didn't realize it at the time, but I worked very closely with Carla, and we worked with the illustration and the text. I would send her the text that we wanted on the page, and then she would work the illustration around the text. And normally in books like this, you write the story, and then the person does the illustration, and then they kind of just plunk the text into the illustration. Well, our text is integrated organically into the illustration, so they work together. And the other thing, we did quite a bit of work in that area. That was the paring down the text was easy. The challenge was looking at the visual aspects of things. So when we were looking at text, we wanted an Indigenous flavor to the book, but also the setting and the time was in the 1920s. And we wanted to reflect that as well. So the texts of today are very linear and crisp. We wanted something more soft and circular. So we chose a text that reflected that. The other thing we did was we centered all the text so that it does give this more circular sense to the visual aspect of the book. And when we were looking at line spacing, we created more line spacing between the lines because we wanted it to reflect the vastness of the space that Anahareo and Gray Owl and the beaver lived in. And then the other thing we did as well, the last thing was between sentences, now it's customary to put just one space between each sentence. We decided to put 2 spaces because it just gives you a little bit more time to slow down and come into a more reflective kind of space. So those were the things that we looked at. And we didn't realize it at the time, but it was quite innovative. When we were working with the layout people, it was quite challenging because they kept doing it back to what is normally done these days. And we kept saying, nope, that isn't what we want done. We want it this way. But we got what we wanted and we're really pleased with it.
So as someone who, thinks visually as a fiber artist, or, like, did you conceive of like kind of what images you wanted when you were writing those words and give that information to Carla? Or like, did you just hand over the text and say, come up with something?
A bit of both. We gave her, and that developed as I was working with Carla, because I started saying, well, you can come up with things, but we realized that we needed to give her a little bit of guidance. And what I did do is I sent her the text so she could see the spacing of it. And then we gave her a little bit of information, not a lot, but for instance, there's a page with the links. And so we said, well, we want a links here. And we also wanted a maple leaf there. And she worked around that. And we discussed what we were thinking and then let her take it from there. And she really did an amazing job of taking it from there.
So you're not like storyboarding for her or anything like that?
Nope. We kind of flow. But that's the fun of it for me, and I think for her too, because it was an interactive relationship, and it just worked so well, and the images just are amazing, and they were just exactly what we want. That maybe not what we envisioned, but what was right.
You had mentioned, incorporating environmental and indigenous facts into the text and into the story. The other kind of structural thing that I was curious about is, in some way, this is told as a story that McGinty and McGinnis are telling.
Yeah.
How did you land on that as like a structural thing for the story?
Because we love beaver and so do kids. And we just thought that is a way to draw kids into the story. And also, there's kind of a method in our madness, I suppose. What Anahareo and Gray Owl both did was raise awareness that beaver are our relations, and that beaver have, well, the indigenous people call them the little people, and they have feelings and emotions, and treat them as equals. And that was part of the reason that there was so much destruction by the European trappers. Indigenous trappers respect beaver and see them as their relations. And if they harvest an animal, they do a ceremony in thanks. and they use all the parts of the animal for their own use. Whereas the Europeans just came up back and slaughtered all of the beaver and the fur-bearing animals, and they were going extinct. So we wanted to subtly raise that awareness that beaver and all life are related to us and interrelated with us, and we need to help them because they help us.
I guess it also adds that, like, kids will just instinctually be kind of attracted to the animal, whereas, like, the person, as you said, Anahareo was not in the Gray Owl book. Like, this is a person they have no relationship or context with. So getting to Anahareo via the beaver is kind of the best way to make them sympathetic or open to it, because just instinctually they're going to side with the animal.
Exactly. And if we can get children thinking about these things, that will carry them through for the rest of their lives. And Anahareo was an incredible force in initiating environmental awareness. And that's the one thing about the book, is that it is intensely relevant to now, because we need the things that she was talking about and that she modeled her life around. Her life just exemplifies the principle of environmental awareness and environmental action. And if we can spread that philosophy further, and I think if you start with children, it spreads to the adults, and hopefully it will help save our world.
Is that why you chose this particular moment in an Anahareo story, that, like, it's the best way to reach kids about kind of this feeling and this change in mindset, that, like, this is where she had it, and so it's emblematic for others?
That's not how we thought of it. I mean, that's what happened, which is wonderful. Things are just happening out of this book. And it's probably, well, there's things that are guiding us, and that's probably where we were guided. But this book is just one of a series of books. The next one is called Sneaky McGinty, and that's all I'm going to say. So, and this was the obvious place to start that, because this is the initiation of the whole story and how they adopted the beavers. And then the other stories are even more about the beaver. So that's what it seemed to us this was the place to start.
Okay, so it's a starting point and not, just one project on its own. Because I, not knowing that there was another book coming, just assumed that maybe if you're trying to kind of capture people and motivate them, it has to be the point at which that happens for your central character.
Yes, and it shows the principles of environmental awareness and environmental action, because she first started out having a relationship with animals. And it's not in the book, but from when she was very young, she would go into the forest and she would watch animals, and they became her friends. So she absolutely loved animals. So that's the first step, is introducing people to relationships with the natural world around them. And then she saw an issue, and what instigated her was that she trapped with Gray Owl for a year after they were married, and she was uncomfortable with it, but she found a lynx in one of her traps, and the lynx had been there for about 2 weeks, and it was starving and it was in pain, and it had tried to gnaw its paw off to escape. And she had to kill it to put it out of its misery. And she went back to Gray Owl and she said, "I'm not doing this anymore. That's it." It was just so hard on her. And so that's the initiator of the action, she realized that there was a problem and that the beaver were going extinct and that the Europeans were overtrapping. And so that encouraged her to take action. So it's relationship, it's identifying an issue, and then it's taking action. So the book embodies the process of environmental awareness and initiation.
Well, and her advocacy work starts with Grail, well, like with Archie, her partner, that like you reach out to the people that are closest to you and then you take it wider. And I thought that was an interesting thing about kind of like, people taking action within their own home and then taking it into the community. And this like think global, act local that we've all heard, that this embodies that.
Yeah, and I hadn't even seen that. So thank you. And that's what's happening as we go along. We're just seeing so many dynamics in the story and the book and the people that we are connecting with because of the book, that there's all sorts of new things coming out with it. In 2 weeks, I'm going to give presentations to Cub Scout groups here, 2 Cub Scout groups here. I've given a presentation to the Probus senior clubs here in Nanaimo. And in April, I'm going to Winnipeg and I'm going to be doing a senior living home, 2 schools, and an art gallery. It just amazes me, the groups that are interested in this, and each group brings out different dynamics of the book and the environmental issues. And it's just lovely connecting with people and listening to their take on the whole situation.
So it sounds in some way like it's achieving your initial goal when you first picked up that Gray Owl book and said, Anahareo needs awareness, but also that the larger issues of conservation and how we interact with the natural world is you're having some impact, or you're seeing response to that.
Yes. And Carol Crow is Anahareo's niece, and she's one of our authors. And then George Hartland is the executive director of Friends of Riding Mountain National Park. And all the proceeds from the book go to Friends of Riding Mountain National Park for their educational, environmental, and reconciliation programs. But Carol really sees this as her legacy project, is bringing awareness back to Anahareo. Because if you ask most people in Canada if they know who Anahareo is, they've never heard of her. So that was our goal, was to raise awareness of who she was and what she did as an Indigenous historical hero. And then the other aspect is the environmental aspect of the whole thing.
Did you anticipate that there would be more than one book when you started on this one, or did that kind of come out? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yes. We have about 6 books, and we always knew that this was the first, and that we do know what the 6 books will be.
And is it all drawing on source material from your play about Anahareo, or no?
Some of that, but during our historical research, and I spent about 3 years researching it, as well as other things. We got 2 historical grants from the province of Manitoba, and we worked with the National Archives, the archives in Manitoba, and Riding Mountain National Park and Prince Albert National Park. And so I have some manuscripts of Gray Owls that were never published. So one of the stories is going to be based on one of the manuscripts that he never published. And one of the stories is based on one of his short stories. But we have a lot of material in the play that I can draw from, but we're not limiting it to that. There are other stories we're going to tell as well.
Right. Do you have a favorite part of this process? Like, because there's, like you said, going through the archives and the research, some people really like that and some people find that laborious. And then it sounds like, obviously collaborating with a visual artist, there's there's different aspects to this kind of project. Do you have a favorite, or rather also a least favorite?
No, I love it all. I enjoyed the research. I love the writing because it just kind of comes through me. I think it brews in my head, and then all of a sudden I sit down and it's there. And then you go over it and refine it and edit it, which I like both parts. I really enjoyed the visual process that this book took us through. I think my least favorite is working with the layout staff.
Well, that's because you said you were battling them over like the word wrap and things.
Well, they've never done anything like this before, and neither had we. So it was really an educational experience for all of us, but it created a really unique book.
Well, maybe now that you've gone through the process with one book, you've softened the landing a little bit when it comes to working with them on these future books.
It'll be so much easier. Yeah, because it's going to be the same fonts, and we know the layout, and they have done it before. So yeah, it's just going to be so much easier. So that part can be fun too.
Sure enough. Now the book is available through Friesen Press, and where can folks get it physically right now?
Actually, we're suggesting that people buy it through Friends of Riding Mountain National Park, and you can go on their website and click on Teacher's Corner, and you'll find it there, because then all the proceeds from that book will go to Friends of Riding Mountain National Park. And the three authors, Carol and George and I, all decided simultaneously that we wouldn't take any proceeds from the sales of the book. We get nothing from any of the work we've done or the sales. It's just a labor of love for us and a donation to the world. So Friends of Riding Mountain National Park will get the whole proceeds if it's bought through them. If it's bought through other places, then they get significant part of the proceeds. In Winnipeg, it's available at the Manitoba Arts Network 210 Gallery, and that's on 210 Princess Street.
Perfect.
And we are getting it in bookstores there. We just haven't had time to.
And as you mentioned, you'll be in Winnipeg for some events at the end of April. Will you have those posted online somewhere, or where should
I have a Facebook page, and yeah, we'll make them available. I will be at the 210 Gallery on Princess Street the first Friday in May, which is May 2nd, and that's their event for the Exchange District First Friday.
Perfect. Well, we're no strangers to First Fridays here in Winnipeg. Lots of great events happening. So May 2nd. And thank you very much for joining us on the program, and congratulations on this first book. I hope to talk to you about some of these future issues.
Me too. And it's going to be exciting. Thank you, Michael. This has been just a joy and a pleasure.